And I'm going to turn it to Kristina, who will introduce the rest of the panel, including Peter Stastny, an old colleague from New York, and Ron Bassman, who was previously executive director of MFI, MindFreedom. And so I turn it to you, Kristina. Thank you. KK, thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
coming, all of you.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate it. Well, this is something that has been let's just say, a heart's desire and a definite passion project for many of us. And we are really excited to share the collaboration that Ron Bassman so beautifully orchestrated and brought us all together under, as this is something that has been his heart's desire for, he'll tell you, lifelong, to really create options and other, I don't like the word alternatives, because we should already have these. And so that gives us even more of a drive to develop and create from a life experience understanding and a collaborative of professionals that also have lived experience. So, Ron, I'm going to hand it over to you, and you can go ahead and introduce SAFE and where it and how it came about.
Thanks, KK. Glad to see we're starting to have a number of people here. It looks like we have 45. In terms of if you want to connect with us at SAFE, you can look at our website, which has been developing very quickly. And I think I've been doing this work probably for 40 or 50 years. I'm really old. And I've thought for a long time that most of us grow up in families, and too easily families are convinced to send one of their members to a doctor or a mental health professional because they're experiencing some form of crisis or some sort of problem, which may often be the inevitable pitfalls of just growing up in development. And then they're sent to a practitioner and they wind up getting some kind of drug, maybe an antidepressant, to mask what they're going through. And that doesn't work, so they're given another drug, and eventually too many people become chronic mental health patients. I'm assuming that most of the people that are attending here have not had the greatest experience, both with their families and both with the professions. So I probably have been thinking about this project for 20 years, and it probably crystallized a bit when we had a meeting at INTAR, which Peter pretty much developed. Peter Stastny will speak later. And I wrote an article for that INTAR with Karen Baker, who does a family outreach project, or did, in Toronto, and also Connie Packard, who is a family member and a social worker who had an adult son who was diagnosed with schizophrenia and had that label, I assume, forever. So what this project is we want to develop a curriculum for facilitators of multifamily groups so that they will learn what a real crisis is and one that can be handled in the family. I just kind of roughly estimate that 30 to 40% of people who wind up being a mental patient could have been avoided if family members learned how to handle it. So in essence, we're developing a curriculum for facilitators, and it'll be a pilot project. Hopefully, if it works out and we readjust it and research it, that we can spread it far and wide. So we now have a group of 11 in our steering committee, all volunteers. And We will be looking for people to tell us what helped them, if they were a family member or a psychiatric survivor, what helped them when they received or had to deal with a crisis, what hurt them, what was not available, that they were looking for, and how to heal from within the family. KK has a great PowerPoint. She'll show you what we're doing, but the main focus of this group at this point in time is to ask you, the participants, who are the experts on what happened to you and people you were friendly or intimate with. And we're collecting that as a survey. If you go to our newly formed website, it's called SAFE, but to get to it, you would go to survivors and familiesempowered.org. We'll post that. And on that website, there's a survey of the questions that I just presented. And I'd ask you, if you can, when we stop this part of the presentation and we ask you to help us, tell us what you know and what you would have wanted to have happened to you as a family or as a person experiencing some emotional difficulty. We're going to put that all together. So if you don't have enough time and we don't get to everybody, you could write to us. You could put your email address in the chat, or you could just write to us at our website and we'll be sure to respond and include you. I guess I can introduce my old adversary and friend, Peter Stastny, and who we've worked together probably for about 30 years in New York, teaching people how to do self-help and kind of criticizing the system in New York until both of us were let go. I think you were retired, Peter. They just got rid of me. So Peter, would you just kind of introduce yourself and what you think of our project?
Thank you, Ron. Thank you. And nice to see you or hear or know about all the people that are joining us today. I mean, the main reason why I'm interested in this is because of Ron, but also there are specific reasons. Ron, Celia Brown, and Darby Penny were a team in New York State for many years. So part of the reason why I wanted to do this personally has to do with their memory and has to do with what they gave us over the years, which is unbelievable. And so in terms of, as a psychiatrist and advocate, I know that families have always been put in a problematic position by psychiatry, often as an antagonist to the person going through the crisis. And, you know, they've actually managed to split families in two, create homelessness, pretending that the system was going to take care of the person, the family can sort of pull out. And all that has been horrifying. And there have been many efforts to bring groups together with families and survivors, whether you call it trialogue, whether you call it multifamily group. I've also been involved with open dialogue, which doesn't involve multiple families. It just involves one person and their family, but it's a way to talk to each other that helps people stay together, support each other, learn how to understand what's going on and talk straight, you know? And I've seen that to be incredibly effective. And I'm hoping that we can do something here that's more than educating, because again, education, psychoeducation has become one of those things that, you know, usurps families and indoctrinates them, which is not what we want to do. We want to do the opposite of that. We want to learn from families. We want to learn from people who are in crisis and then bring them together to create opportunities for mutual support and recovery. So that's about all I want to say at this moment. And I look forward to KK's presentation and especially to the feedback from all of you. And of course, MindFreedom has always been an amazing organization. I appreciate that you are allowing us to do this here.
I think that was summed up beautifully, Peter. Ron, anything else before we start rolling?
I'm sorry, KK, I didn't hear you.
Is there anything else you'd like to share before we start rolling through the PowerPoint?
No, why don't you start?
Okay. I also would like to thank everybody for joining and being a part of this conversation that is so highly important. And, you know, I think it was stated so beautifully by Peter. And to provide that safe space, that's part of this, is to really have family members feel supported, and that to keep hope in some of the hard times. That's, I think, one of the key elements. So, we are the Survivors and Families Empowered for Recovery. We, as Ron shared, we've come together to develop, and that's where all of you play a huge key role. Okay, let me go back. So we are made up of a very diverse group of professionals, survivors, and individuals that are either family members of survivors or family members and survivors themselves that are professionals too. Because as we know, many of us wear a multitude of hats, and it's really about meeting the person where they're at. And it's really highlighting, we want to stay in tune with highlighting hope and resilience of the human spirit. Our experiences have taught us that the deconstructing the fear and the myths, and we'll get into the myths a little bit and have some conversation about that, about mental illness, will reduce, it will also cause less restrictive interventions when family members and individuals are able to speak up for what they really need and what they didn't receive and what they would like to receive. I think that it more dialogues in the positive recovery based elements. So this is something that we really saw a need for. Our mission is to develop and nurture the strengths of families and individuals to understand and work through the emotional struggles that are today too easily designed. It's easy to give the diagnosis, serious mental illness, which can only be helped by, I'm so sorry, my screen, by health professionals. Our vision is reduce over resiliency on restrictive interventions and restore hope. You know, guys, we don't really want to be seeing the court-ordered models and the restrictive restraints and so on and so forth. We want individuals and the family members to feel empowered and equipped. This is a beautiful, beautiful piece that Ron put together. I don't know, Ron, would you like to read it?
Sure, thanks, KK. My ascent from madness to my present state of clarity and self-acceptance was and is a journey whose responsibility always resided within me. However, as I try to describe and share with others what wisdom I acquired to aid others in their work, I acknowledge one element that I do not understand or take credit for, something that is named or interpreted according to one's unique beliefs and values as luck, fate, karma, or God's blessing. I believe that as long as a person is alive, some seed of hope, some possibility is there waiting to be fertilized. Hope fights the fear, nurtures the courage, and inspires the vision and the work required to resist giving up and accepting that your goals are unattainable. Deep in the recesses of our being, there are safe sanctuaries, secure hiding places for never fully lost dreams. But sometimes they are hidden so well that we can no longer reach those parts of ourselves. The help we need may come from expected and unexpected sources. I wrote that about 20 years ago and just wanted to put something in our website that dealt with hope. Back to you, KK.
Well, I think that that does sum it up, because we do want to walk with others during these times and keep that hope alive when sometimes we feel like nobody could possibly understand. So I think it's beautiful, and it speaks to the core of the mission. Okay, so what makes us different? I think that we're looking to offer educational support and resources that foster hope in recovery from extreme mental states or challenging emotional experiences without force or toxic treatment. And, really walk with family members and equip them during these times that, I think that they don't know where to turn. Our approach. What can you do if someone is struggling in your family? Often we do feel that it's strange new feelings, strange new behaviors. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to support or what's going to be harmful or helpful at those times. We have come together, a group, like we said, of psychiatric survivors and family members, and some of us wear a multitude of hats. And we really are convinced that working together, we are those life experience experts that can attempt to gather the data from you guys, the experts as well, and equip with the proper tools and modules and support mechanisms that are needed to meet the needs of the increasing numbers of serious problems that we encounter today, along with possibly navigating the system or the pitfalls of the system. We launched the website to challenge mental health services that often does more harm than good. We really want to offer that hope and that resiliency of care, and that is so beyond that treatment-minded model. Nothing about us without us is at the core. And we want others to see that not only recovery is possible, but the family's resiliency together is as well. So we had a great debate of what myths should be here, which myths should not be here. I know that we're going to circle back around to this one, because I'm sure that that will be a part of the conversation. Is there a lot, do you guys feel there's a lot of stigma that needs to be, myth busted, or is that something that just we, keep within to let's say, reintroduce different language? I think that's a big part of this, is that, like we said, there needs to be other supportive options within the community than just that medical illness model. These are our core values, and our commitment. Our core values are honoring autonomy and dignity, safety for all, healthy relationships, cultural humility, and authenticity. We're committed to that cultural literacy, and we have committed to honoring all recovery journeys, no matter what that looks like. So we would like to equip, educate, and empower. And so we are going to be, based upon feedback, really looking at the topic areas that we need to really develop out to best support families and allies at that time, where they can best support their loved ones through those darker times. that authentic space, just really equipping individuals and family members with helpful tools and not harmful engagements. Okay, as you guys know, Ron started this entire development team, and he, like he said, it's something he's always felt in his heart led to do. It's been a work in progress for 20 plus years. So we're really, really grateful for his leadership on this project. That's me and Peter. And we also wanted to just applaud Miss Lisa. She has been incredible. She is the individual that has been supportive with the website. And this has been such an incredible steering committee to be a part of. I'm truly humbled to be a part of this collaboration. I think all of us feel that it has such high importance, and we feel like the time is now. So, as we stated before, this is where it is the questions that we do need your feedback. So these are the questions that we would love to. I'm going to be able to put the web link so you can fill it out on our website if you'd like. But this is what we would really, really highly value, the conversation, to get the feedback. So I'm gonna go by one question at a time and maybe get some feedback if that works for everybody. On the very first question, what did you or your family find helpful? And then what did you or your family find harmful? So if we could just maybe think about what that was for you, and if people are open to share and we'll get our feedback. We're really looking to get the life experience expert knowledge and insight and feedback so that we can develop exactly what the family and the allies need base is to support their loved ones at this time. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute and we'll start with those questions. If anybody feels that they would like to share, just you can unmute and we can start the dialogue.
There's hands up, I see.
So I see Sardi has a hand up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, we got Sardi and then Pam next, I think. Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
I guess it's not really a question of what's helpful or harmful to the whole family. Every family member has a stake. The caretaker wants some rest. A lot of people, if they get a child with a diagnosis, they can get then either financial help, health insurance, free bus tickets, all kind of things. And if you have an elderly family member and you put them in a home, you can take their house and their car. So clearly, some things are more helpful to a person who wants to rest or to have more money or more free stuff. And helping is a very interesting concept. Do you want to help your family or yourself? And of course, a person who is loony, let's say, wants to be free, and they don't really care much if their family is worried or stressed looking for them. So I don't think it's really that much that psychiatry pits people against each other. It's just another weapon that people use to meet their own needs when they really don't want to take care of their brother or their other connections. So yeah, benefit or harm, it's all in the eyes of the beholder. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you for starting us off, Sardi.
Yeah.
It would also be helpful if you identified yourself in terms of whether you're a psychiatric survivor, a family member, or professional, or just an interested person. We also,
Yes, I am both. I am a survivor. My partner is a survivor, and a lot of our friends are survivors.
thank you. The other thing that I would ask is if you want to be anonymous, just say so, that you're not identified.
No, that's okay. I'm Svetlana Shagorodskaya. Just people have trouble pronouncing that, so they call me all sorts of names.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know who had their hand up. I think I saw Ruby.
Eliana's next.
Hi, thank you so much. Hi, I'm Eliana, and I have a 35-year-old son who is a victim of psychiatric abuse, and I have my own issues, of course, some related to, maybe prior to his, maybe part of his issues are from me, and, admit I have my own issues. It's complicated, but so what was helpful? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely, I cannot tell you one single thing. I am so sorry, but zero was helpful. What was hurtful? Well, I probably have to talk for hours, but I'll try and summarize. First of all, he was wrongly diagnosed. He was not schizophrenic. He has symptoms of schizophrenia now because of the medication. So he has pharmaceutical drug-induced schizophrenia, which I think is very common. I didn't have anywhere to turn. I had no idea. I kept him away from the system. I'm into simple living, alternative living anyway. And when the therapist suddenly said schizophrenia, like he's fine, and then he's schizophrenic, what's that? And then they took him and locked him up because he was 18. So it was almost like they set him up, like they were after him. This is a kid that talked about mercury and fluoride and Hitler when he was 6 years old, and he wasn't wrong, but he knew stuff that he shouldn't be knowing and he shouldn't be telling. And, I don't want to sound paranoid, but I think they do go after people, that there are agendas. And I know over 17 years of dealing with this, they have gone after my son. And so, what was harmful was wrongful diagnosis. I asked this, one thing that was really important that I didn't know is that the psychiatrist is the only one that can get your child out. Like the psychiatrist has to agree, unless there's some legal issue where they wrongfully certified them, which did happen the second time he was locked up, and I figured it out, and the lawyer wrote the papers to get him out. But other than that, the psychiatrist is totally in charge, and I was reaming her and I shouldn't have been. And she told me, I'm the one that can let him go. So that would have been a good thing to know, to be a little more, I don't know, you're triggered. They take your child, they take your loved one, and it's very triggering. So I ended up calling NAMI, that was the only thing I had ever heard of. And I did talk to the director in Denver, who actually is a very nice woman. And she was very open and honest about things that aren't very NAMI related, like spiritual things with her child and things that you wouldn't normally talk to a NAMI person about. But in the end, they didn't help me at all. So I just felt so alone, and I am alone. I don't have a partner. I don't have any family, just me and my son. So it was horrifying, and a break? No, that wasn't a break. it was worse than anything because I was on the phone, felt like 24/7 trying to figure out things and learn things on my own. And, what's the law and what's the this? And the doctor told me, the psychiatrist, I said, why are you keeping my son there? And she said, he's psychotic. And I said, tell me why you say that. And she said, well, he says the air is toxic. And I said, well, the air, I didn't say, but the air is toxic, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. I mean, it's toxic. And she had no clue, that is my son, and he speaks in metaphors, and that is how he is. And he wasn't really bad when he went in there, but every single time he got worse and worse, more and more drugs, forced ECT, forced restraints, just a lot of violence. He was sexually assaulted twice, 2 different times. He was physically assaulted the first day he was locked up. Last time he was inpatient in Denver, had to go to the emergency room, get CT scans, and no camera footage, no nothing, just lies. They lie about everything. They made me out to be the villain. They try to alienate families instead of helping them. If you have family members, that's a really huge thing, because here you have a family member that wants to participate and help, but they make you out to be the bad guy instead of let's work this out. Let's educate you. Education is something that's so important, because we're thrown into this suddenly, and it's not like, I have a bachelor's in psychology, but I had no clue, absolutely no clue. I know Russ also has, education, in mental health, and probably had no clue either. It's like you're just thrown into this system. And so what else? So he was physically harmed. He did harm himself. The drugs caused harm. The isolation. My son is autistic, has a dissociative disorder, maybe OCD. Now another thing came up. He has medical issues like seizures. That's another thing that is not dealt with, are medical issues. They just, it's just all about, oh, well, that's your schizophrenia. If you have that, oh, that's your, it's all just, that's the mental health issue, instead of looking at those medical issues. And, so I'm really grateful for what you're doing. I think this is so important, and I really want to help in any way I can. I'm a good networker. I have a couple of psychiatrists who are interested in, being part of the solution, and, being available to share, other options. And, yeah, nothing helpful, everything harmful. Yeah, anyway, that's my brief story. Sorry I went on so long.
Thank you, Eliana. There's a lot of pain out there. Who was next?
Ruby's next, I see.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for putting this together, guys. This is so much needed. So thank you so much. I applaud you guys for putting this together, and hopefully with all our feedback, it will, be helpful for everybody going forward. I'm here for my son, and it's very similar to all the other stories, and I think what was really harmful is just going in and out of the hospitals. Basically what the hospitals do is he's admitted, they stabilize him, they discharge him, and there really isn't any feedback for the family due to privacy issues. And it's just basically he's left on his own, along with just prescribing the medication. They give him the resources, but then they leave it up to the individual to follow up. And, when someone's already going through a crisis, obviously their ability to think clearly, help themselves is really depleted at that point. And really what their need at that point is a support group, not in terms of, them being forced into a group where, because of so much stigma out there, they're not going to be reaching out, or, you know, they're not going to be out there looking for resources. What really would have been helpful, and the other thing I think that's harmful is the legal systems also. Whenever the police come, you find they do not know how to deal with these kind of cases. And instead of helping them, you know, find resources, guiding them through the proper path, they end up charging them. And so making it even more difficult for this individual who's already lacking any sort of trust on any system. It's just compounding the problems more for them. What really helped was just leaving it up to the families. I did a lot of research myself, trying to find different avenues that were available. And it's just going through, you know, just researching, I think is what really made the difference. And I think what really would be helpful for everyone is similar to an open dialogue approach. I think that's what the families really need, because the mental health illness is so different. Everyone experiences it so differently from everyone else. It's kind of hard to say, okay, you know, there's this group, instead of trying to fit the individual into the groups or the services that are available. I think what we need to do is really try and have the open dialogue approach, where the individuals come into the family, assess the individual situation, and then provide recommendations based on what the individual and the family is facing at that point. That, I think, is going to be a lot more helpful than trying to fit the individuals into services that are available out there.
Thanks, Ruby.
I think we have next Alan, unless you'll have a response, panel.
Hello. I'm Alan Hunter, and I have the webpage open in the background. And after this is over, I'll definitely go and try to fill out your survey. But it is going to be somewhat problematic because of how things are worded. There have been times in my life when I've been emotionally fragile, desperate for help, and miserably lonely. But at the time of my first incarceration, none of that was going on. I was quite enthusiastic and in a very good mood, and was attempting to address the ways in which I didn't fit into the world by changing the world. I did not need recovery, didn't consider myself to have an illness, didn't perceive myself to have a disability, wasn't in a state of crisis, and didn't regard myself as impaired. And so one of the things I need, one of the things that would be useful would be if there's some way of engaging with the world around me with those willing to be helpful, without it having to start from a starting point of assuming that there's something wrong with me if I need that kind of engagement, because there's not. The time of my second incarceration, I stepped voluntarily into that one because it was very much billed as state-of-the-art, top-end, very modern, enlightened approaches. And I took some of that with the usual grain of salt, but still I had high hopes that I actually could engage, that I could get them to back down from the notion that all the changes that had to occur in me. But eventually found that although they were slicker and more polished, that it was still an adversarial arrangement. And I thought to myself, I'm never again going into a place that has locks on the doors and bars in the windows, or the equivalent thereof, unless I get to hold the keys.
Any panel response?
I just really quick want to share that I'm kind of hearing a lot of needs for rights information as well, so that you guys can be equipped to advocate effectively. I think that's one overwhelming, and the lack of communication and support in those hard times. I've heard a lot of being alone. So I just really, I know that all of us value your feedback and your input, and have compassionate understanding and just sincere, authentic gratitude for sharing personally as well.
Alan, I'm just wondering, you said you were, Celiana, that you were hopeful. Was there anything positive that you felt like you got out of any of your stays?
Actually, yeah. The one thing that really stands out for me that was positive about my experience in the fancy high-end place was what they called psychodrama. And a lot of the credit for that belongs with the two individuals who ran it, because they really let us define what we wanted to work on, and then we would act out the scenarios in which the problematic issues would come out. And they would let us give feedback to each other, and they didn't try to be the experts and tell us, well, here's what you should do, or this is your behavior that you have to change. They just facilitated. And we had video cameras, and we would do it as drama, and then we would watch the thing on the screen afterwards and critique it. And I have to admit it, if that could have been sort of dipped out of the coercive environment, I would have continued to go back for something like that.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was a great question, Eliana. Thank you. And I see Kristen has got a hand up.
Hi, I'm Kristen Kelleher, and I'm a survivor of 4 years of active psychiatric abuse from a highly respected hospital in Massachusetts. I was a victim of medical malpractice during my first inpatient hospitalization, and the practicing physician found a way to cover it up by doctoring my medical records and misdiagnosing me with a specially stigmatizing different diagnosis to strip me of my credibility. At the time, I had been a 12th grade high school English teacher and special education teacher. I had multiple master's degrees. I had respect of my community, of my family. My word mattered. But she was really successful in discrediting me because nobody believed what had happened to me. It wasn't just the hospital that didn't believe me, but my own supportive family. It was the hospital not believing me, my family and friends not believing me, other providers and other programs not believing me led to so many more instances of abuse ranging from physical, sexual, emotional, financial, basically every way that you can be dehumanized. But that wasn't what had a lasting impact on me. What's had the lasting impact and what has taken like the most work in my trauma therapy has been my family not believing what I had to say and their constant invalidation. For years, I tried to tell them what had happened, and it was always the doctor's word over my word. And I think that a really large, I feel like the information and knowledge for families and for other people going through this, that there are good doctors and bad doctors. Some doctors are really bad people and criminals. The fact that that's not out there enough, I feel like gives the doctor's word and potential abuse of power so much more strength. And I've been working through it. I never thought that I'd be where I am now. I'm currently working on the advocacy that you guys were talking about at the beginning of the meeting. I work as a high school and middle school English teacher at an adolescent psychiatric hospital. I'm nervous and timid to tell my story because of how many times I had people tell me that what I experienced didn't actually happen. But I know I also want to provide people with what I just said, that information, that there are times when this type of abuse really does happen in ways that you can't fathom. So I'm starting with just like doing the teaching and being there and being the advocate for students who are going through similar things that I went through and making sure that they're receiving fair treatment. And I hope someday that I'll be able to lead to the next point where I can actually, share my truth and hold some people in hospitals accountable. So thank you for listening. It's the first time I've really been open about this or with a community of other people. So knowing that this exists gives me a lot more hope. So thank you so much.
Can
So
I just jump in for a second, Susan?
that's the point. I was going to say, does the committee want to speak? Go for it,
Mhm.
Peter.
Well, I do want to say one thing about all the people that have spoken, which is that I know we were going to get to that sort of towards the end, but the end may be soon. And I want people to think about how whether they would be in a position to become facilitators for such groups that we're intending to put together. And I know we wanted to have a little discussion, but probably won't have enough time for that. But I do feel, and I correct me if I'm wrong, that we're going to bring together a group of facilitators and do some training together and start some pilot work. So if anybody in this room, I was going to say in this room, thinks that that could be something for them, I hope they let us know. Thank you. And of course, someone like, Kristen, it would be an amazing facilitator. Everybody who spoke would be an amazing facilitator. And then to think not only how their stories could benefit others, but what else they could bring.
Right. Peter,
So
you
Peter,
actually
oh,
took
sorry.
my thought. If we could have you, I will put in the chat where you send a response to the info box. If you are interested in being a part of the further conversation, the development and or the facilitation, as Peter highlighted, please send that to the our information comments box. I'll put in the chat in just a moment. But I do just really want to celebrate, Kristen, for you sharing. That's beautiful. And sometimes we do just need others to bear witness, because I could really and truly authentically relate. And holding that space and bearing that witness can be powerful in empowering us. So I thank you so much. And I'm going to put it in the chat, guys. So if you are open to that opportunity of future facilitation, please let us know.
So Peter and
One of
Kate,
the things,
just led into what I think is exactly what we're about in this group, which is what can we do next? And some of it is kind of what you're talking about, but also in advocacy. I'll just put that out there. And then, I'm sorry, Ron, I didn't mean to jump on you. We always have a lag time here. Go on, and then we got Megan next.
I just want to respond to what Kristen was saying. I think you bring up a really important point. The feeling of loneliness, being alone and not believed. And we're hoping that what we can do is create multifamily groups that can share, support, encourage, and talk about their experience. I think, well, from my own experience, one of the things that was of great help to me was I had one old friend who wouldn't give up on me when I was laying on the couch and had no memory. He would pull me off there and take me out to see people that I didn't remember because of the treatments. And I think it's important to have that connection. When I was looking at different family programs that are around now, there are a number of family programs that are around, but they're run by professionals. I strongly believe that the best thing we can do is have the experience of people who are either family members or ex-patients, recovered, or in some stage of recovery, talk about where they are, what happened, and where they're going from there. In England, out of the Hearing Voices movement, they came up with, don't ask a person what's wrong with them, ask them what happened to them. And I think that's a powerful statement that we will try to incorporate. One further thing that as I've been listening, I thought, what do people in this group believe in? Do you think there's such a thing as mental illness? Is there a thing called schizophrenia that actually exists? Or is it a person in many ways dealing with the uncomfortable story of their life, where they're stuck and not getting support? One of the things I saw from one of the family groups was the idea of blame and shame that they struggled with. So there's a lot of stuff to change, but we're a small group still, and hopefully this pilot project will, with your help, spread. And we're still looking for understanding. No one solution for everyone. We're all diverse and different, and we can support most people better. But some, you know, there needs to be, like you're saying, if it's a good hospital, that might be the best place. I don't advocate for it, but I feel that we really need to be open to making the changes so that there are more choices available. Self-choice.
And, you know, I just want to throw out there, you know, maybe celebrate the ones that honor individuals' rights and choice and value the people. You know, we write reviews for hotels, right? And we wouldn't stay in one that got a bad review. Why is this any different? It should actually be more important. So you actually bring up a really important point. I just want to highlight. So thank you so much for sharing.
Can I jump in real quick with the thing? I just want to point out that, you know, we can all talk about alternatives. We can all talk about soteria. We can all wait until the cows come home, until there's enough alternatives out there, which there will never be. So in the meantime, I think what we're talking about are things, mutual dialogue, open dialogue, trialogue, are things that actually have helped people in the absence of the kinds of alternatives that everybody wants. So I feel this is a real gap in our thinking, that we have to wait for certain kinds of expensive and complicated things to happen.
My comment, gosh, I love you just said that, Peter, because a lot of times it's just about community, right? And but we don't know how to do it. I know Sarah has her hand up, so is there any more comment on that from the presenters? KK, Ron, Peter? Okay, I think Sarah's been waiting for a while. Oh, and by the way, Sarah has been a long time manager. I never know what your title is. Person who made everything happen at MindFreedom International. So, who with Love You Lead On is co-sponsors of this. So, Sarah, go for it. And thank you. And thank you for your work.
Thank you. Oh, the list of things that didn't help is really long, and many of them have already been stated. A few of the things that weren't mentioned, I'll just throw those in. Restraints didn't help, physical restraints, forced drugging, the degradation of civil commitment. My daughter's been through 12 civil commitment hearings. Those are very degrading, and they're very divisive and very emotional. Those weren't helpful. And then institutionalization. I've heard people mention hospital stays. There's a continuum of ways that people can be institutionalized. My daughter's experienced every segment of the pipeline of being institutionalized. Acute hospitalization for stabilization, step-down facilities in a locked facility, foster homes, group homes, I mean, you name it. And she was, she had a tendency to do what they call elope. She would run away, and she would walk 20 miles in some cases in the middle of night to go back home. And she was never allowed to live back at home. And we were forced to make the draconian decision to actually file for guardianship in order to get her out of this cycle of institutionalization. And that's a really, you know, it's kind of like taking a play from the playbook of psychiatry or the mental health system. To have to file for guardianship is a really serious loss of a person's rights and autonomy. That was not an easy decision to make. And I think I've spent the last 6 years of my life trying to compensate for the harm that was done to her in the mental health system. and maybe overcompensate to the point where it became impossible, and my physical and mental and emotional health was just drained to the point where I had to just say, okay, throw my hands up. So what helped? Okay, that list is Ron Coleman's Hearing Voices training, hosted at Louisa. Louisa, you're here. I forgot the name of the training, but it was hosted at her house. So the first time that our family was brought together in a group setting that was led by a training led by a psychiatric survivor who founded personally 200 hearing voices groups in the United Kingdom. Okay, having him facilitate that training in community with other families was like a turnaround watershed moment in this history of chronic like despair and just this awful, this journey of terrible misery. That cycle finally started to thaw out a little bit because of that training. And the things that sort of helped a little bit ease the suffering of having a loved one in a hospitalization, having to be searched before you could visit, restricted hours, all the indignity of that. That was ameliorated slightly by occasional kindnesses of nurses who would break the rules intentionally and secretively in order to, and for my daughter's best interest or in our family's best interest, because rules more or less in institutions were enforced, but sometimes they would break the rules, and for those kindnesses and those little glimmers of humanity in those dark places, I give nurses a lot of credit. But moreover, I give the peers that are embedded in those hospitals a lot of credit. In Oregon, we have not a lot, but there's a small number of peer specialists who work within those hospitals, and some of those became personal long-term friends. And that's more than I can say for doctors and psychiatrists. After my daughter was discharged, you never saw them again. But maybe it's because of the rules and regulations or liability. For some reason, peer specialists can remain friends with people after they've been discharged. That's a really big deal. That continuity in relationships was really, really helpful. And plus, they're so open, I can call them and ask them for advice, as friends. So I guess having those little glimmers of help was helpful. Another thing that I found helpful was dance therapy, which I discovered by a fluke last year. And the dance therapist who is working with my daughter currently, he travels around the world to do dance therapy. So, he's not on the West Coast very often, but when he's he keeps a studio and an office in Eugene, fortunately. So I can count on him being in our town for at least twice out of the year. So whenever he's in our locality, I quickly make a lot of appointments on behalf of my daughter with him. And he spends one-on-one time in 2-hour sessions with her, just doing silent bodily movement. Huge, huge help. That's been big. And I would say music therapy has helped, but we haven't had any formal music therapy. I'm still looking for someone in those veins, but our family has been drawn towards music a lot over the years. We have family jam sessions, and sometimes, like if my daughter's out in her house and just shouting at herself or having some dramatic conversation with herself, and it's disturbing, the neighbors, like namely us, in the other house. I've encouraged her to just sing instead of shout. Maybe she could express the same ideas or the same emotions through music. And it's actually, she was open to that suggestion. And so now she's singing as much as she's just shouting and talking to herself. So somehow making that transition from just blatant like psychodrama all by yourself with no audience to music, which is which is more socially acceptable, I might add. So that has been really helpful. So I would say music, dance, motion, physicality have been most helpful. And one of the things I'd really love to see in the future, if it's possible, is more support groups. I've wanted to start one for myself, but I don't have any facilitation training. So all the people, parents and psych survivors who call and they're in distress, I want them to have some kind of support group. I don't think there's a lot going on, and I would love to see that. And I would have also liked to have seen some kind of performance coaching for myself and my husband, because we have this loved one stuck in an institution. So occasionally when we're not shut out, we've been invited to go to these quote unquote treatment teams. This is in the past when she was institutionalized more, but I didn't know really how to stick up for my daughter. I didn't know how to advocate for her. I knew what her preference was. I knew why she was non-compliant with her treatment, and I knew why she was in conflict over it. She resisted everything until they finally kind of managed to program her into believing she's permanently mentally ill. But anyway, I didn't know how to really stand up for her, because I'm not very good at dealing with powerful people, powerful, influential people who have more credentials and more education than I do. And if I had some kind of coaching or training to stand up to like bullies, like arrogant psychiatrists, I could really use that. So that's kind of my story in a short.
So really quick, can I ask you if like advocacy, family advocacy role play, like actually like empowering the family member to practice the advocacy that's needed on their family member's behalf, something like that as an alternative?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would have
That's
found role
awesome
playing so
feedback.
helpful, especially like if you've got 2 weeks to prepare for a hearing and you want to be a really
Yeah,
good witness and you don't want to buckle under the pressure or crawl under, you're afraid,
yeah,
you're emotional, and you feel like you lack legitimacy, because you have to remember a lot of parents, they're suffering from their own vicarious trauma, their own form of disempowerment. A lot of parents have been shut out of the planning and decision making. And so there's this huge power imbalance, and you're afraid you might fuck up, excuse me, but I don't want to say it, but when you go in those really life or death situations where you feel like it's really critical to say if you say the wrong thing, you're going to be shut out permanently. If you really scream and at the people and you lose your diplomacy, you'll be shut out forever. So you can't do that. But you're like totally like inside screaming, let my daughter go, and you're afraid of just your emotionality itself will be used as some kind of proof of why your daughter's considered so mentally ill, and why I'm not a fit home environment for her to go to, and all. So it's like you feel like I don't know, I could have used role playing. Yes, definitely.
Thanks, Sarah. Haven't seen you in a long time.
And Ron, because you were our executive director, Sarah was kind of the glue for a long time, right? She's
Definitely.
MindFreedom. So I just want to acknowledge and shout out. I also want to, I think I'm next on the list, so I don't think I'm talking out of turn. I just want to shout out to everybody sharing. I just think it's so brave, really, because this is so hard. And I want to acknowledge that and appreciate um, the sharing. And then we still have hands up. So mine is more of a question once we get all comments, and other questions is, and we're really close to our official time, but as most of you who come to this Judi's room know, we kind of hang on as long as we can. Well, there's people who are able and willing to talk. My question is, there's so much not right stuff happening. And to the panel, what do you think, is there anything we can do systemically? And we can hear other comments and answer this after, but my interest is to impact on the system and help shift it. So, in a certain kind of way, we're talking to the choir here. How do we do something that's impactful on the system? So that's a question, but I'm glad to forego that. And I know we've got a couple of hands, and I thought we had Louisa, but I think you took your hand down. I'm not sure. But we got Anna and Russ. So that's it.
Anybody want to respond to the question that Susan?
I would love to, because this is another big key advocacy, just I would say, tool and weapon and vehicle, right? That we're very that's very disconnected from the advocacy system and families as well. It's the protection and advocacy that organizations that every state has. I would highly encourage you all to identify in your state your disability rights organization, which is the protection and advocacy agency that is federally funded, and they have what is called a PAMI council. I would highly encourage you to apply to become a part of that PAMI council, because you can, as an individual with a lived experience and as an individual with a family experience. And this is actually where the advocacy and policy shaping of what, as we would say, are federally funded protection advocacy organizations create their initiatives, their strategic goals, and their policy advocacy for each year. I know that there was just several bills in several different states that were very similar to the care court models. And I was able to connect with the PAMI council members of that state and get them some tips and tricks for how to submit testimonies. And we come out fiercely in voice and demand the choice, and that you guys will be heard. I would say that is one of the largest. Also, partnering with other family advocacy organizations, such as the Alliance, such as I know Mad in America has a family support that, or I believe, element. But just we need to come together. We need a cohesive community, because if we don't speak up and speak out and state that the options are well overdue and demand them, just very much like what Peter said. Very quickly, I do want to identify that we have 2 other steering committee members on right now, actually 3. And I don't know if Steve and Andrea, if you'd like to share any input or perspective, but I just don't want to jump in at any time if you'd like to.
Were you talking to me?
I think talking to I think KT was talking to both of you.
Steve and Andrea, and there you go. Yeah.
So yeah, I also think that the PAMI councils, protection advocacy for individuals with no illness advisory councils, have a lot of potential to galvanize the protection and advocacy agencies to enforce the rights of people. But my big thing would be, well, there's the NARPA PAMI Institute that I think is very important, and for people to attend, and that it would be good for us to get for you to let us know if you're interested, so we can stay in contact with you. So I'll put my email address in the chat.
Peter, I'd like to hear what you have to say about the question.
Well, I honestly don't want to get into the system advocacy question, but I do want to say something about the business of NAMI, because NAMI has been active for 50 years and has been very successful in systems advocacy. And the question that I would have, the reason why I feel and we feel that something other than NAMI is needed, is because they have not been so successful in supporting people. I believe that is actually true. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some people have benefited. But I think this is the kind of thought that I would have. How do we provide something that will actually support people, but not indoctrinate people? And I know that there are family groups, like I worked with family groups in Europe that are much more, I want to say, liberal and not stuck in the biomedical framework. So I don't think we want to have to kind of draw a very hard line between what we're doing and other family groups, because they do, many of them have learned, and I think obviously the people that are talking here have learned over time that something other than the traditional family support is needed, and that's what we're after.
One of the values that were listed on our website and that KK did with a PowerPoint was left out something that I think is really, really important. I need to get a hold of Lisa to put it in, and that's the mystery. We don't know so much about what helps people and what hurts people. You know, there's such diversity in this. Some people just spontaneously get better. Is there such a thing as mental illness? And is it across the whole population of people who are struggling? Is it a brain disease? These are the questions, not the questions. These are the basis of many of the treatments. And personally, I believe in the mystery of life. And within that mystery, all of us struggle with something or another. Maybe there are 2 or 3 people that get through life without stepping into a pothole, but I think most of us do. And in terms of what's helpful for people, I think there's a wide range of things. I think the dance therapy, I forget, that was Sarah that mentioned it. I think psychodrama is a very powerful kind of therapy. And I think that when I participated in psychodrama training, I found it to be most helpful for me. There's a lot of different kinds of therapies. There's a lot of different kinds of family interventions. We just can't say that this is the way it is. But we need to have people understand that they're not getting solid information. And NAMI, as Peter mentioned, has created a kind of ethos, that how do they support family members? So they have family to family supporting family members. And I believe, once people get into the family therapy structure of NAMI, it's very difficult to get out of their belief system, because many with good intentions have gone to NAMI to help them. And then you see results of it. You see the people that are on massive quantities of drugs, have tardive dyskinesia. You see them on the streets. So what do the family members say? They tried the best they could. They got the best information from NAMI. So how do they open up? I think that they've done the wrong thing and have influenced in a negative way their offspring, or it could be a mother, a father, anybody is. I remember when I was in school a long time ago, the belief system was not as strong on it being a biomedical model. The kind of mantra that was said was, given the right circumstances, anybody can become mentally ill. I don't know if they still teach that. But we've got to change. To me, the advocacy is changing the belief system. And how do you change the belief system? By recovered people, by people who got out of the system, because we are the people who have been hurt and will really put it on the line to make the changes. I've got to tell one story that I love. And does anybody else want to speak? I don't want to take away from their time.
We have a couple more hands, but Ron, go for it, because what you just said was very powerful. And we're going to go over, and those who can stay on, we keep the room open. So go for it.
Probably about 15 years ago, I was invited to a meeting of the College of Mental Health Directors. This was an organization that was talking, actually they met in Santa Fe, and it was a beautiful setting. And I was substituting for my boss who couldn't go. And I got into so many fights with people there about the algorithms for drugs. But the keynote person there was the person who had developed the concept of comprehensive community mental health centers. And he was receiving an award. When he got up to speak, the person who introduced him talked about all his credentials, how he worked with John F. Kennedy and, you know, when they were establishing the community mental health centers, and everybody was in awe and trying to get next to him. And the first thing he said was stayed with me. He said, how many people here, these were all mental health center directors, have been fired from a job? And a number of people stood up, and he looked at the people who remained seated, and he said, you never really tried to do anything worthwhile, did you? It's kind of the idea of getting ahead means that you go through the mainstream and you don't take on the challenges of what you need to do. And I think it takes us who have been hurt, who have seen, I don't know, what was it, the curtain that kept the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain that you didn't see, that was just nothing there. We have to fight. And I'm hoping that a number of you here will stay connected with us, join, get training as a facilitator, tell your next door neighbor who has a child who is going into the mental health system, tell them what you think. We need to spread the word. We are the minority. I'm sorry for getting up on a soapbox, but go ahead, Anna, you have your hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I wanted to answer some of the questions, so the earlier questions regarding what I found helpful and unhelpful. So I have been, I've experienced the psychiatric system like for a long time, starting from when I was 17. So I think like one of the most unhelpful things that I've experienced is the fact that, as you mentioned, a lot of it feels like they only focus on the biomedical model. And unfortunately, there's no focus on the trauma model. And I think this is one of the major issues, especially if you're a child and the trauma is coming from your parents, basically having abusive parents. It's especially bad because then like the gaslighting gets extra bad, because if you're a child, then they always will take your parents' words over yours. So if your parents go to the doctors and say, my child is mentally ill, my child has an issue, which is what happened to me. My mom went to the doctor and said, oh, like my child is depressed, and then told the doctor to put me on Effexor. So like that's not even something the doctor suggested. My mom told them to put me on this medication. So in this context, it's extra bad because it's the fact that not only do they not understand that like, and I was actually in a really traumatic environment, like my parents were emotionally, verbally, and sometimes physically abusive, but also because they value like basically your parents' word over yours, they will believe your parents' narrative over yours. So like definitely healing meant like recognizing that, well, this wasn't my fault, in that like I was basically put in mental institutions by my abusers. But psychiatry, like the really evil part of psychiatry is that they basically enabled my parents' abuse. So basically, instead of really, you know, like recognizing that I was abused, like, which I actually did mention it, but they mostly just ignored it. Instead, like it was like, oh no, like you have like, they told me I have like bipolar, I have psychosis, like got the bipolar psychotic features diagnosis. And it's really bad. Like it really does like go to show that they really do think it's like, oh, like, you know, like you have an issue, like they see the symptoms, like, oh, like you're depressed or like whatever, like you're highly stressed, but they don't recognize like where some of that comes from. Like, you know, like the trauma model, understanding that people who are in highly traumatic environments are going to experience certain, you know, like mental health issues, obviously. But the idea is that they basically put me on like so many meds, like just like even remembering all the meds, like when I was there, like they put me on all these like antidepressants, antipsychotics, like mood stabilizers and all that. And it's like, right, like that really did solidify to me in my mind that there's something wrong with me. Oh, like I'm just so ill. I'm so mentally ill. And like it really did take me a while. Like it took me until like I became an adult and I moved out that I realized just how much I was wrong there. Like the psychiatry, the problem is it not only enabled my parents' abuse, but like when I was inpatient, they basically recreated the same invalidating traumatic environment that I suffered at home. Like my experience like in mental institutions was also very similar. Gaslighting, the invalidating, like basically treating you like I've had really bad experiences with mental health people in the, you know, like in and inpatient, like I have a lot of trauma from that. And it's like, yeah, like they're just taking me from one traumatic environment to another. They didn't recognize the problem was trauma. And then after that, they made me like basically do like family therapy with like my parents, my abusive parents. And they were like talking about how once I'm like basically discharged, then like they create a family plan of like basically my parents have even more control over me because I'm just like mentally unstable and I need my parents to watch over everything. But the problem was, yeah, exactly. It's like they weaponized the system against me. And like psychiatry didn't even acknowledge it. They're just like, oh, you need to be on meds. And like, it's like, well, have you not noticed how every single time I have these psychotic symptoms, it's right after like an abusive episode from my parents, but they don't recognize that. And that's definitely the least helpful part, especially when you're a child in the psychiatric system. They will always value your parents' words over yours, especially if you're labeled mentally ill, then automatically they're able to like say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, which is why they allow doctors to involuntarily institutionalize you and then drug you. Like you can't even, like they just put me on meds. Like I wasn't really able to do anything. They just did that. So I think, yeah, definitely that's probably the least helpful, especially if you have abusive parents. Like it's, yeah, so I really do wish that the trauma model were also like acknowledged. Like so many of these children, like they're not mentally ill, they're just being abused. It wasn't until I left my parents' abuse at home and I did EMDR like and trauma like therapy that I was able to like recover. And I've tapered off like almost all my meds. I'm only on the Mictal. I lost like, right, like I had gained like 50 pounds on these meds. I was extremely tired, like it totally messed me up. And also like being off those meds definitely reversed some of the adverse effects too. So I feel like I feel a lot better now. And I'm off of a lot of those meds. And I just did like trauma therapy. And I'd say that definitely helped me a lot more. It also helped me like not internalize a lot of the victim blaming stuff that I heard both from my parents and from the psychiatrist. So I'd say especially child psychiatry failed me really badly. So that's some of my input based on my own experiences.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it is an issue that's really not addressed, the loss of credibility for children. And I think that just increases the mental health problem. You know, a child intuitively sees something that's being said that really is different than what the actions are. And when that's denied, how do you trust your own reality? It's really, it's an important issue, and I'm sorry you suffered through that.
One thing I would like to ask of people, and that was a very powerful story. And children suffer so much. But one thing I would like to ask of people is to include in maybe the section of what helped, basically the story of how you got to this point where you're in this meeting. What led you out of the NAMI bubble or wherever you were, and led you to find your way to this group where we don't have the money that NAMI has. I think that would be helpful. That's all. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Thanks, Steve.
I think we got a hand with Russ and Carol.
There you go. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just, so many good comments, and thank you all for sharing. I think that the sense of loneliness and isolation and trauma, that's a very common theme. And what I would, as has been mentioned, NAMI is where everybody, they channel people to. I will say that was one of our first stops, and with all my criticism of them, which is very strong, because I don't think they are really ever there for somebody who's being really hurt by the system. They tend, because they're funded by, they get their funding, a lot of it from big pharma, and they're, anyway, but the point is, I think some of the individual people do care. And I'm thinking about the meetings that I went where somebody would just come in, they were in the midst of a trauma with their family, with a family member, they'd pour out their heart. And, the people there would try to be supportive, but they would never really talk about alternatives. You'd never hear of anyone whose recovery involved getting off of medication or extricating themselves from it. And also, even when there was support, it was a once a week thing. And that's, we're much fewer in numbers, but I'm really glad to see this effort and a lot of people responding that they would like to be facilitators, because we really need to have something that provides boots on the ground. And when someone's in a crisis situation, the way an open dialogue does, where they come and have people there at the beginning, we're not really, I understand people have their lives, their jobs, and their families, so that's quite a challenge. But I'm hopeful that as the momentum builds, that there will be something there so that people can, feel that connection. And even early on, I remember, I mentioned, when someone mentioned David Oakes, I was amazed that I saw his site, and I was desperate to try to get some other input, and I actually was able to talk to the guy in person. That was amazing to me. And I see Jim Gottstein here, who's been very helpful as we've gone through our journey, and it's been pretty rough. But he was also somebody that I was able to talk to, and that's, if I were ever to try to talk to somebody in one of the other organizations, you'd have to kind of go through all this chain of phone calls and messages and so forth. So anyway, I guess that's just a thought that as this thing takes hold, hopefully it will, that this will be, that's something that I think is really important for people to have, somebody that's actually they can talk to, at least by phone, and preferably if this could catch on, to have actual in-person meetings that would provide real help and give some, really good alternatives and things that would be conducive to recovery. That's all.
Thank you.
And I just want to jump in on behalf of MindFreedom. We're a lean machine, so sometimes you get our answering machine, but it's an advocacy organization, and with Love You Lead On, and I think you can get to, well, I don't want to speak for Susan Fitzmaurice. Are you still with us, Susan? But you can get to us pretty easily. Yeah. I appreciate those words. And we're getting really overtime here. So we have some hands up. We keep the room open. But Susan, do you have something you want to say? I'm not sure if we lost Susan Fitzmaurice. Love You Lead On. All right, so we can go with the hands, but before we end up shutting down, I'm going to do our little plea here. MindFreedom organization does not take funding from government, which is why we can host these kinds of forums. We don't take money from pharmaceuticals. Ron Bassman was one of our previous executive directors, and Jim Gottstein's on our board. I'm not sure if there's anybody else on our board. And Sarah Smith was one of our major people who kept this thing going. And I think Kara's on, so I wanted to make sure we acknowledge them and the work they do to make this happen. So thank you. If you are not a member of Mind Freedom, you can go to our website, mindfreedom.org, and become a member. If you are a member and want to make a donation, we love for that to happen as well, so that we can build on what we already have, which is the Shield and Judi's room, and we're working on some other projects. So I just wanted to make that plug before we lost everybody, because we're already over our regular time, but as usual, we keep the room open. Thank you, Susan Fitzmaurice, who encourages me to do that when I feel like it's time for me to go to bed. So, and I don't know if anybody wants to jump in on that, but I appreciate all the work that you all do. And then I know we have a couple more hands raised.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hi. So my name is Patrick Morathi, and I'm very grateful for Mind Freedom and these gatherings that you have. I actually took off work today so I could be a part of this meeting. So in late 2018, I was going through a very acrimonious divorce, separation and divorce that lasted 2 years, and was very suicidal, and began to self-medicate on psychedelics, and ended up having a psychotic break, and police took me to a local hospital here in Springfield, Missouri, where they proceeded to put me in a 4-point hold and inject me full of medications over the course of 7 hours. And I passed out 3 times, and then they let me go with no transportation, no meals, no follow-up. And I had a lot of social anxiety. I was so embarrassed by what had happened, because I had basically a freak out at a local health food store. I wasn't violent, but I was loud, and so it didn't show up in public. Lost my home. Ended up being homeless, and it was 5 years of homelessness that I'm still climbing out of, actually. But I was in Kansas City about a year later, staying in a homeless men's shelter there, and I met a lady who turned out was the director of NAMI in Kansas City, and I shared my experience about what had happened, and she actually cried and told me that I had been abused. Up until then, I just thought it was my fault. I thought I had done something wrong, and this is what I get, and so on and so forth. And so I started an anonymous Twitter account, and started calling out Mercy Hospital here in Springfield, and the Sisters of Mercy, who originally started this hospital. And eventually they gave me the runaround, but initially they gave me the runaround, but they eventually gave me the contact information, which I demanded, for the director of patient relations. And she invited me down to Springfield, and I met with her. And when I told her about what happened to me, she couldn't believe it. She cried twice. She documented everything, promised to hand the information to the higher ups. And I went back to Kansas City, and I didn't follow up with her because I was dealing with homelessness. I had a lot on my plate. I had a lot of PTSD and flashbacks from what had happened. And I was just trying to maintain. But eventually, my sister invited me to move into a home she bought to remodel in Springfield, and I came down and had a bit more stability, and got in touch with Shannon, who's a director of patient relations at Mercy. I met with her and a colleague, and they told me that since then, Mercy has now made it mandatory for all staff and patients in the emergency room and the Marion Center, which is a psych unit, to attend nonviolence and de-escalation training. They have also done away with 4-point holds. They no longer use those at emergency room and psych unit, and they don't force medication on the patients. That the patient has a say in terms of their treatment, whether they're going to take it or not. That's when I realized there's power in complaint, and there's power in finding the right people at these hospitals and calling them out, because I realized it's really just a lot of people in our wider communities don't know what's happening in these hospitals and in these psych units, and a lot of the higher ups in the hospitals are unaware. It's really just the staff and the patients that know what's happening. But a lot of times the patients are so traumatized, and they're oftentimes homeless afterwards because they're held indefinitely. They lose their jobs, they lose their homes. Many of them end up committing suicide. It's like 5 times the international average, a suicide rate. And so I realized that, if with just a little tweak in the policy, these hospitals and psych units could possibly, even if the patient could leave hopefully better than when they came in, but at least not much worse as is the cause. And what drove me to challenge Mercy was a realization that what happened to me had happened to countless people before me, and was happening to people every day. And it's happening in many, many hospitals around the US and around the world right now as we speak. And so I'm working on a podcast where I'm interviewing people who have dealt with psychiatric abuse, and activists that are working to expose what's happening. But I'm also beginning work on a documentary which I'll start in the fall, focused on that, on people, survivors of psychiatric abuse, people who've had terrible experiences in these hospitals and psych units, but then also people who've had positive experiences in there, and look at, we can reimagine it together, what works and what doesn't work, but then also looking at alternatives to psychiatric care, such as Soteria House, which is the main one that stood out. I'm from Kenya originally, and I had a meeting there's only one Soteria House in the US, it's in Vermont, and had a meeting last week with the director of training, because I want to start a Soteria House in Kenya, where such a thing is desperately needed. But I also want to start one here in the Ozarks, and it's entirely possible to start one. And it's entirely possible to have such a place in every city in America, because even staying at a Soteria House for a week or a couple of weeks is cheaper than being in a psychiatric unit for one day. And when people realize what's happening in these hospitals, I think for one, they will, hopefully call the right person, email them, demand that the policy changes, and that needs to happen. But at the same time, we also need stopgap measures that exist before someone ends up in a place such as a psychiatric unit. And such places do not really exist, So people end up masking their symptoms, self-medicating, suppressing everything until finally they explode, and then they end up in a psychiatric unit, and they end up being abused. So just the fact that it just seems like loneliness is an epidemic. There's increasing rates of suicides and addictions and all kinds of problems, that people know there's a problem. They just don't know what to do about it. And they choose to stick their heads in the sand, because if they acknowledge there's a problem, but don't realize, but they know there's a problem, but they don't know what to do about it, that can actually make the situation worse. And so I think education, letting people know about things like, Soteria House and what they do, but also the abuse that goes on in the hospitals, and what can be done to prevent it and make noise about it, so that hopefully things change, can really make a difference. And I think this is a message that has been needed for a long time, ever since medicine tipped over from doing no harm to chasing profits. But especially in this day and age, right now, in this moment, is desperately needed, and I think people are ready for such a message. And I think, using what we have the technology to do podcasts, we have the ability to tell our stories. You never know who's going to impact. because I remember when I was in depression and bedridden and you know, wanting to die, but also saying to myself, I'd rather die than go back to a psych unit. I actually lost a friend last year that had the same sentiment and had nowhere to go. That I really just needed someone to speak to me where I was. And anyone that's a psychiatric abuse survivor who feels alone needs to hear from other people who have dealt with the same thing, because that will give them hope like you can't believe, you know, and will encourage them to keep pushing forward, you know, because a lot of people suffer in silence and they suffer in isolation. And this loneliness is what's killing us. And for a long time, I was ashamed about my experience, didn't want to tell anyone about it. You know, I'd go to my job and people would make jokes about people in the psych unit. So, oh, the weather's bipolar. Oh, you must be bipolar. But now it's just gotten to where it's like, you know, life is short. Too many people are dying. I need to be honest about my story. And there's someone out there that will appreciate it, because that someone was me when I was bedridden. There's so many people there right now that, you know, you sharing your vulnerability is actually a source of strength for them and for you as well. So I just want to commend everyone for coming together, sharing their stories, doing the work that is so necessary and needs to be done. And yeah, I think we got this one step at a time. The more we gather, the more we start forming groups that meet online and that meet in person, you know, just the more change will happen, because what the world needs is more love, you know. So if we can be present for each other, then we're actually making a difference that is much larger than we can imagine. So thank you.
Thank
Patrick,
you.
thank you.
Patrick.
Thank you for your very powerful story, what you're trying to do. And please
Thank you.
stay in touch with us if you want to be involved in what we're doing, or if we can be of any help to what you're doing.
Absolutely. I will do that.
Advocacy.
Yeah.
And I want to add, also thank you.
I don't know why I have a fox too. I'm trying to show my face, but it's not. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I also just wanted to say thank you. And also, there's at least a couple of people on here who have some experience in Soteria houses,
Wonderful.
including Jim Godstein and myself, Susan, here. And
Okay.
glad for you to contact me. I don't want to offer Jim unless he wants to be offered up. But and we still have another hand up, and we're way over the time. And yeah, I like the fox too. So
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, you like the fox? That's good.
yeah, it's cool. I'm looking for a cool thing to put on my little face here. I got nothing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I like it. So mine might be a wolf. Anyway, I think Pam and Jay have had their hands up for a while. And Ron, do you have more to say? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, but I just did want to respond to the Soteria thing. So.
Okay, do you want us to respond first? Did you want to respond first, Susan?
Sorry, I was on mute. I was just saying, thank you. If anybody's interested in Soteria, please feel free to contact me. I also, I had said it earlier, but I think I may have missed it when I was talking about MindFreedom, that KK is newly on our board, which we're really happy about. And so glad to have KK. And I know we have a hand up for a while, Pam and Jay again.
Okay, thank you. You know, just a couple of quick comments. I don't know, there was a couple that got on and asked, you know, what helped, right? And I don't know if I made it very clear in the beginning when I commented about what helped us, but you know, Anna touched on it as well, is that You know, and when I remember when we went to the psychiatrist, and you know, our family is not perfect, and there was issues we had to deal with. And I think what the psychiatrist told us, with our son present beside us, was that there was no perfect parents. And I'm thinking about what Anna said and what the things we've been doing to get better as a family and also for our son. And the answer was there before we went into the hospital. And it had to do with each one of us doing our own individual therapy and then a group therapy together, because we all had to heal and acknowledge and learn how to listen to ourselves, each other, on a different level. And we all were dealing, well, not our son, but my wife and I were dealing with past traumas that we were not acknowledging that came out in our family unit towards our son. So, you know, when we all acknowledged that and got help for each one of us, and each one of us saw that we were trying to get better, we were able to have family therapy that actually moved forward. And I think that was the big thing that was super helpful for all of us. But like I said, the system basically went against what we innately knew, and that, you know, they took up for the parents and said there's no such thing as this being a parental problem. Right away, you know, with our son present, they were acknowledging that he had an illness, and we're like, well, no, you know, this doesn't make sense. So acknowledging each other first before accepting a professional opinion is huge. And then the last comment I want to make was when our son went on his last psychosis, there was a police check done on him in the morning, and they cleared him and they allowed him to go. They said he passed all tests. Then he was later picked up that evening because he was acting strange. But the police said to us the only reason he was picked up was because he was in a good neighborhood. So if he would have been on Hastings Streets in Vancouver or another neighborhood, he probably would not have been picked up. So, I mean, this problem is bigger than just our kid, right? I mean,
have to say the police officer picked him up as good.
yeah, and the police, my wife just said, I don't know if you could hear, but the police officer was probably the most honest, straightforward part of this whole process. He was a really good guy. But you know, we had to let our kid go. And you know, I've read it in many books that night, like when we let him go, he had to find it in himself to want to get better. So there's a lot of moving parts here, but I think Patrick summed it up quite well, and it's learning how to love. And I'm grateful for this group, and that's all I want to say. So thank you.
It seems like we're just about out of time. I just want to repeat something I said to somebody in the past week that was having problems, and she really got upset when somebody said, God will save you, or God won't give you more than you can handle. And I said, basically, it would be better if God had a big hose and he sprayed compassion and empathy all over the land. I hope I didn't offend anybody with my God statement, but I just think along with love, Patrick, we need a good dose of empathy and compassion for others. And I think most of us who have suffered have a fair share of that. Thanks everybody for attending. Stay in touch with us. Go to our website. Help us create what we're all looking for, a compassionate, empathic community that helps each other and doesn't rely on the pills.
Can I say one more thing, just really quick?
Of course.
I said nothing was helpful when I spoke before, but the one thing I want to acknowledge in the hospitals are the people, not the people with the certifications and the labels, but the other people that are just there helping, the attendants, and that they were, you said compassion, that I found some people that were just so kind and compassionate. They're blocked from doing that you know, once they find out I'm talking to them, you know, the officials. But there was a lot of compassion there and wisdom that the psychiatrist did not have, like experiential wisdom. So there was that I wanted to say that was positive. So
I really appreciate that, and we're really actually over time, and we'll keep the room open as long as people want to stay on. But I do want to say that there's a great deal of resources on the MindFreedom website, and we, as I said earlier, we don't take government money, but we always keep doing these kinds of things, and we run the Shield, which is a really important human rights kind of safety net, as we heard. I also want to really thank KK, who pulled this together, and thank you, and Ron and Peter Stastny, and our board members who came. I think we got Jim and KK, and if I'm missing somebody, but Al Galves is our president. We've got other board members, and honestly, all of you who come and make this happen, because Judi's room really is not just about the presentations are amazing, but it's also about the people who come and speak and open up. And one of the reasons I really appreciated this particular presentation is you just included everybody. And that's just like so perfect and in keeping with this. So thank you so much. And our next presentation is going to be in April. First Wednesday in April, Rob Wypond, who wrote the book, Your Consent is Not Required, and we will be sending out an email asking for you to submit questions in advance, anybody who comes on. And Rob has donated a book, his book, Your Consent is Not Required book, one book, hard copy, and one audio as a gift. If you register in advance, we're going to have a drawing for the participants who registered in advance. So I think that'll be a fun one, and I just wanted to let you know that. And then the following month, we are going to address a very challenging problem in this country, which is police basically shootings of people because they've been diagnosed as mental illness. And we're going to have a family member. And I think a reporter who covered it and some other folks. So I think that's our next thing. And then hopefully the next month, I don't want to promise this because we haven't set it up yet. I think we're going to talk about racial disparities on people who get targeted by the police. And somebody here brought that up. Neighborhoods, racial disparities. And I think we're going to address that in May and June. So, and I welcome anybody's suggestions. Just send it on through to MindFreedom International, and any ideas you think about what we should address in these Judi's Rooms meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing and just so authentically, and everybody's compassionate understanding and support in the chat. We just really appreciate it.
Are there any final comments, questions that we need or would like to address before we close? And I think we're going to close pretty quickly.
I just want to celebrate Patrick. He brought so much hope, and he said, "Let's reimagine. Please help us reimagine the options that should have always been present in our communities." And we need all the feedback and input from all of you with your lived experiences. So thank you.
Any other final words?
Just thank you. Thank
Go
you.
on.
Thanks to everyone.
Mm.
So I hope to see you all next month. And I think that that will be a great one as well. And again, what makes these Judi's rooms great is the participation, to tell you the truth. It's really, our presenters are amazing. And then we have really good participation. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.